By now, you've all heard of Italian Wine Unplugged 2.0, the latest book published by Mama Jumbo Shrimp. It's more than just another wine book. The fully updated second edition was inspired by students of the Vinitaly International Academy and painstakingly reviewed and revised by an expert panel of certified Italian wine ambassadors from across the globe. The book also includes an edition by Professore Attilio Scienza, Italy's leading vine geneticist. The benchmark producers feature is a particularly important aspect of this revised edition. The selection makes it easier for our readers to get their hands on a bottle of wine that truly represents a particular grape or region. To pick up a copy, just head to Amazon.com or visit us at mamajumboshrimp.com.
Welcome to Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on Italian Wine Podcast. Listen in as we journey to some of Italy's most beautiful places in the company of those who know them best, the families who grow grapes and make fabulous wines. Through their stories, we will learn not just about their wines, but also about their ways of life, the local and regional foods and specialities that pair naturally with their wines, and the most beautiful places to visit. We have a wonderful journey of discovery ahead of us, and I hope you will join me. Welcome to Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on Italian Wine Podcast. Today it's my great pleasure to actually travel to the heart of Irpinia, to Atripalda, to be with Dr. Piero Mastroberardino at one of Italy's most iconic wine estates. We're continuing a conversation we started a couple of weeks ago, a fascinating story of the Mastroberardino family, and I'm delighted that we can actually have a part 2 interview focusing on topics we didn't really get a chance to cover last week. So thank you very much for being my guest today, Piero. How are you?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's my great pleasure, Marc, and I really hope to have the chance to show a little more about what we call Mastroberardino experience, so the different aspects of our contribution to the world of wine.
Yes, and it is a very significant contribution. We've just spent a good hour walking through the fascinating family museum that you curated. It goes back to the start of the family's history here in the 1700s. And the different generations and the contributions they made. And what I'm really struck by is how across the generations, it's been such a story of innovative entrepreneurship, really exciting, bold, traveling around to find new markets to share the wine that the family's produced.
Yes, what is really impressive for me is on one side the continuity of this story, that it's really something that hits the visitor, because you have the idea of the approach to wine business and to wine family business, so the relevance of the tradition of a family inside a territory, and then also the capability of organization, of giving a structure to a small company, even 2 centuries ago, or that, sometimes people don't realize that you can have a coverage of all the risks through insurance policies on everything, even 150 years ago. And you cannot imagine that you have a structure that covers your internationalization process with people taking care of many different continents, markets, and languages. So I think it's very interesting as an experience to go through this museum, not only to understand what is wine business or what has been Mastroberardino in the wine business, but also to understand what was the business in the past centuries.
Yeah, it is a really fascinating story. And to see this story actually documented with handwritten letters, seeing the beautiful and detailed handwriting of your ancestors that tell the story through documentation. They're searching for new markets. think what's also striking to me is we consider the Mastroberardino family to have been pioneers in really bringing the wines of southern Italy to the world. And I thought that story began post-war with your father, who we'll be speaking about in a minute. But what's fascinating is how early the family was selling wines to markets in the US, but across the world a very long time ago, and wine in bottles.
Yes, the story on foreign markets starts at the end of 1800s. They are really pioneers, and I think that it's correct to identify my father as the new wave of Mastroberardino winery, but in his mind and in his heart, there was this strong feeling of bringing back the name of the family to the success of 50 or 70 years before, that he knew through the tales of his father, and then that he had been experiencing when he was a child in the late 20s and beginning of the 30s.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and of course, you recounted in our previous interview the difficult time in the 1940s, the difficult time when the Allies had bombed the area, when men were away at war, and your father took over the company at 15 years old.
Yes, he was very strong as a character, and he was living in a very strong relationship with his father, because my grandfather Michele got sick in 43, then he died in 45. And so as the older brother of my father, Angelo, was under the German army, my father became, first of all, the leader of the family business. And on the other hand, he became the person who read the newspapers to my grandfather, the person with whom my grandfather used to play chess in the times. So this meant that he got all the stories from his father, and he got the possibility to get a strong experience that he put in his next years, in which his father passed away. And then he was lucky also because his older brother, when he came back from the war, said that you have to also to study. I know that you are managing the company, but he wanted to bring him through university. So my father studied technical subjects and became an enologist. And then he took over the technical side of the company with a perfect professionalism. He also made some courses abroad to complete his specialization. So he was in charge of almost everything, studies and the business in the late 40s and 50s. And in the 50s, he was really a leader for a company and was recognized as the great innovator of Italian wines, together with other 4 or 5 friends of him that were, had a similar story.
Pioneers in other parts of Italy.
Yeah, exactly.
That were really taking this, taking Italian wine to the world and really celebrating this long tradition of Italian wine that goes back literally 2,000 years. Now, your father has been called an archaeologist to the vine because of his dedication to these ancient grape varieties that go back to the Greeks and Romans, something that, of course, continues entirely here today. Now, how did your father have that passion for the past? You said that he studied engineering. Did he do classical studies?
Yes, he was coming from the high school that were classical studies, and then he went through chemical, biology, and enology. And he was a lover of the old books. And he used to study all these ancient books talking about, coming from Pliny, the Naturalis Historia, about Columella, Tito Livio, and so on. he used to mention parts of these books almost every day, and those were his readings every day. You saw in his room every day on his desk some of these old books, and these were really his base of knowledge. And so he knew very well the roots of our viticulture that, as you mentioned, are partly from the Greeks and partly from the Romans. So we had these two main trajectories of our viticultural platform. And the Greek one, Greco-Aglianico, and the Latin one, mainly Fiano, but also other Greek writers, are still the base of our work. At some point in the early 70s, he wanted to start a research plan in order to bring back to life the knowledge base of the Romans in viticultural training systems. And so he started working at a project that could allow him to understand more and more about these different training systems of the past. Then only in the 90s we were able to bring something to an operative level with the collaboration that started in 1996 with the Italian government, with the Ministry of Culture in Pompeii, where inside the archaeological site we were able to plant several small vineyards, each of them dedicated to different grape varietals, different training systems, and there were 15 small vineyards. And the project started in 96 and lasted up to the end of 21. In this project, we were able to reproduce all the ancient techniques and reproduce also the density of plantation, the position of the plants, and everything that was linked to the world of viticulture in Roman times. So this has been an interesting project for us to understand more and more about what was the original approach to viticulture, how it was evolved and advanced in some sense, even if the motivations for some technical choices probably were different from the ones that we got in our current literature, but the options were similar at the end. So it was extremely interesting for us. This is something that has always been at the top of the thoughts of my father. As he usually said, we have to bring our story of our wines and our grapes back to the roots. Okay. All the projects dedicated to these grapes aimed at bringing back to life the original flavors of these wines. And so many of the research that we are currently running.
Just sticking with the Villa dei Misteri project, before we talk about some of the new projects. So your father also inspired in you this love of the ancient world, this love of classics and of this connection with the past, for you personally.
Yes, because at the end I realized that classical is something that generates a bridge, a link between the past and the future. You cannot have anything classic if you're not an innovator. So you have to make changes, and at the end, time in wine business is like a circle. It's something that brings you back, old things as new ones, time by time. And so I've seen in my professional career many things that seemed to be 20 years ago something a little older or dusty that now are considered the frontier of research and innovation. So it's very funny. I think that we must keep a strong link with our roots in order to be real innovator in our territories.
Okay. Now, just a few more details about this Villa dei Misteri project. You say that you actually planted in the vineyards, actual vineyards that you were able to find traces of posts, and able to utilize the Roman training systems.
Exactly. To reposition the plants in the exact same position of the 79 AD eruption, and this was made with the collaboration of the archaeologists. And so you see that those vineyards were made with a density of plantation that is about 8,800 plants per hectare. That is something quite crazy. I mean, currently, after many years of experiments here in Irpinia, we decided to stay on 4,500 up to 5,000 plants per hectare. That is a good density, considering the steep slopes that we have here on the mountains, but there it's very plain, and it was possible to work with a little higher density. That was the original ones from the Romans. And the reason for that was that they wanted to have a higher level of shades during the working in the vineyards. And so the approach is different. Today we talk about density of plantation because we want to make a balance between the biological individuals and the microenvironment. The reasons were different, but the options were similar, as I was saying before.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. And were you able to determine the grape varieties that had been planted through DNA?
Yeah, we have plenty of information on this, and we made a lot of studies. But of course, literature is a very strong support there because from that time we have so many documents, but also we made a lot of studies on the residuals that we were able to analyze in the region, in the area. So we got plenty of information about and then Pompeii, as you know, was so rich and a huge expression of the culture of the time that you got very dedicated and precise description of every part of social life, and wine was right in the middle of that process.
Of course, it was a city of wine, wasn't it?
Yeah.
People were drinking it, but they were trading it.
Yeah, and the amphitheater, and the position of the vineyards is another option that is not a case. It's something that was made for a precise reason, and you see Via dell'Abbondanza with the wine bars on the street and so on. So everything is as a reason for being there.
Yes. Well, it must have been hugely exciting to actually plant the vineyards and see the fruit come to fruition and make that first. What year was the first vintage?
2001 was the first.
2001.
Yeah. But again, the research plan was mainly dedicated to the training systems because, of course, the microenvironment in Pompeii is plain, no elevation, is closer to the sea. You don't have the big escalation of temperature that you need today to have a high quality wine. So probably it's not a wine that you can age like a Taurasi from Irpinia, but it's very interesting as well because you are doing an experiment in a very peculiar environment with a very dark and sandy soil with the richness in minerals, but of course it's wines from the coast and not from the mountainside.
Even in classical times, the wine of Pompeii wasn't considered a great wine. It wasn't the Grand Cru of the Romans, was it?
Well, yes, probably it was more for a consumption in the city, in the way we mentioned before. So you got the production, and then you got the wine bar that gave the wine to the people going to the show at the amphitheater.
Yeah. Now, you were concentrating on training systems. Did you consider making the wine in Roman style? I know now amphora is, it's become quite important in Italy, but
no, it doesn't make sense. I mean, the technology was the same. The control of temperature was there with the Dolia system in the soils, but the process then doesn't make sense. At the end, you got something that is not in the line of the aesthetical expectation of the consumer of today. And of course, you do experiments on those processes, but at the end, you don't bottle a wine like that.
Sure. What were the grape varieties you decided on then for this wine?
First of all, we decided to focus on Piedirosso. That is the grape varietal that is the most adaptable to that environment. Piedirosso doesn't love cold environment that we have in Irpinia, but has a very good expression on the slopes of Mount Vesuvio, so close to Pompeii. And also we used a little of the Sciascinoso in the blend. That is another typical Roman grape. In the second part of the project, we planted also some Aglianico with the bush training system but Aglianico, gave us more troubles because Aglianico wants a colder environment. So at the end, what is really weird is the fact that in Pompeii, Aglianico was harvested in late September, while here in Irpinia we harvest in the beginning of November, and Piedirosso is harvested there in October, more or less, the same period in which we harvest in the Vesuvius slopes, is a little higher. So it's a completely different behavior of the grape varietal of Aglianico in two different environments. This was another interesting scientific achievement that we got. The influence of the microenvironment can move, the maturation period from mid-November back to mid-September. That is a lot.
Yeah. So it was a real learning process. Which has helped in further researches, which we'll speak a minute. But first of all, you've very kindly opened a bottle of Villa dei Misteri, and I'm very excited to try it. It's a wine I've read about. So salute.
It's a 2012.
2012 from grapes grown within Pompeii. I know. How many bottles would you make a year?
Italian Wine Podcast. If you think you love wine as much as we do, then give us a like and a follow anywhere you get your pods.
$1,000 per year.
Okay, so
the current, the last vintage release was the 13. The 14 is going to be released, and then we also have up to the 21. That was the last harvest made in the project. Up to the 21, they are still in the cellar refining.
Well, it is fascinating to taste. Now, when you first tasted the Villa dei Misteri, your first vintages, did you really feel that you were tasting the past, that it was connecting to that time nearly 2,000 years ago, from when life stopped on the streets of Pompeii?
No. I think that we must honestly make the difference between the research project dedicated to viticulture and the wine that probably I wouldn't have even produced because the focus was on viticulture. But at the end, the government side said, okay, you will produce some fruit, some grapes. So why don't you use those grapes to produce a wine and to give this wine to the government in order to have the possibility to use it, in public events. And so we produced this Villa dei Misteri that became a kind of event wine, and it was used in Italian embassies, in big moments of the Made in Italy events. But it's been a good experience. But at the end, as you can see, the wine is very pleasant, has the character of a wine from Campania. It's very interesting. It's round and delicate as a wine from the coast can be. So
it has good fruit still. 2012.
It's aging well. It probably will not have the aging potential of a Taurasi that after 1 century is still alive and vibrant, but it has a good potential of aging as well, and it's a very pleasant wine.
Well, it's an absolutely fascinating project, and I know that you spent 25 years on the project and have carried on research into wine in so many ways. You do so many things. You've curated the museum, you write novels, and you research. So this was an important project. I think it's an absolutely fascinating one. Tell us about your research now, and in particular, the Stilema project that we have here.
Oh yes, Stilema project is the most important thing I'm working at, and it was started as an idea in 2014, right after my father passed away, and I wanted to work on some of his ideas and to also leave a tribute to his professional career. So Stilema, the word Stilema meaning the collection of styles of an artist. Stilema is a collection of styles of an artist that is the viticulturer Piero Mastroberardino. And it's made of 3 wines, a Fiano di Avellino di OCG Riserva, a Greco di Tufo di OCG Riserva, and a Taurasi di OCG Riserva. And each of them representing the benchmark in terms of approach to winemaking process, the benchmark during the evolution of my father's career. So the whites, Fiano di Avellino and Greco di Tufo, reproduce the style of the whites aiming at a very long refining. So wines that are released in the 5th year after the harvest. So it's something very unusual. But the wines from Irpinia, like Fiano and Greco, really can make it. And I think that they deserve it, and that we must take the responsibility of presenting these wines to the consumers, the wine lovers, in a way that can give them a full idea of the potential of these wines. So Stilema, Fiano and Greco, currently we have just released the 2018. They are so fresh. The color is still the same of the wine that comes from the last harvest, but with maturity and the complexity of flavors that is outstanding, with a very an expression of salinity that comes from the process. 24 months on the lees means that you have a huge protection, but also you have the enhancement of this soil character that is outstanding. And the Fiano goes a little more towards the fumé, and the Greco probably a little more towards the hydrocarbon. I mean, the style of a Greco refined. Different wines. Greco has more power, Fiano more finesse, but those are the 2 wines that I really love to drink currently.
And demonstrating that these 2 great white wines do have a capacity for long aging.
Yes, this was something that we already used to present. The vertical tastings, mainly on Fiano di Avellino, with bottles dating back 40 years, were already something that we used to do. But it's different now, because with Stilema, you think of these wines in that perspective. While in the past, we used to show the potential of aging of that wine, but was the current Fiano di Avellino with a longer refining. This means that the evolution in the bottle was faster, while I'm really confident looking at the first data, because Fiano is already at the 4th experience. We started in 2015, the first harvest of Fiano di Avellino Stilema. I see that the evolution is very, very, very slow, and these wines are really outstanding. So I'm really curious, but also very happy about this experiment talking about the whites. If we move to the reds, the approach is completely different. In that case, Taurasi, Stilema, Riserva, the current vintage just released is 2016. That wine is a revolution compared to the world of Taurasi that you can experience currently on the market. The Stilema Taurasi goes back to the styles of the Taurasis of the 50s and 60s. So in that case, we are shortening and reducing the maceration with lower temperatures, with rest temps in, and with a huge freshness, much more agility, and beautiful transparency, less concentration of the fruit, complexity, a little more exotic nose, and with a touch of fruit that goes more towards the small red berries than the darker ones that we find in a Radici or in Historia. So it's a completely different tasting profile. It's a wine that has an agility in the glass, an agility of the tasting, a drinkability. Being a big and important wine, you don't have the idea of too much earthiness, too much, concentration on the palate. This is something that I love in terms of style, elegance, and finesse. And this is exactly what my father used to do, producing the Taurasis with which, when I was a child, I first came in touch with a big red wine.
One thing that is most striking to me is that wines under the name Taurasi, Greco, Greco di Tufo and Fiano were being sold by the family well over 100 years ago under those names. It sounds like, to me, like the stilema, you're really going back to the roots of the family to really express the territory and those three historic grape varieties in its full an expression, complex, not looking for those nuances of cru, but really embodying what those grape varieties represent.
Yeah, you're correct. And I think that I've been very lucky having a father that paid a lot of attention to the family roots and allowed me to have a beautiful library of wines that are witnesses of an evolution of the way of thinking about prestigious, high-quality wines in Irpinia. And I feel the responsibility to bring this message on, to give next generation the same opportunity that I got from my father. And so Stilema project is the way to start creating something that I want to leave as a patrimony for the future to them. And it's very nice because, sometimes you feel the heaviness of a process like this. In wine business, it's not. Everything is so pleasant and so fascinating that at the end, even if you're aware that you're doing something important, it's something that you can enjoy, with your family, with your friends, knowing that pleasantness is a good driver for research and development.
Yes, I guess that drive to create great wine, it's also enjoyable wine.
Yeah, definitely.
Final one I'd like to talk about is Historia. You've mentioned it because that returns us to the ancient world, to your father's fascination with the classical world. And in many ways, I've always thought of Historia is the greatest expression of Campania and is the wine that really links us to the Roman world. So that wine that you maybe would have liked to produce in Pompeii, but because it's a coastal vineyard, the wine wasn't that one. Historia is the wine.
Yeah, Historia, the full name is Naturalis Historia. Historia is a project started in the 90s. It's the second wine project that I personally took care of. The first was the More Maiorum, that was a Fiano di Avellino, started in 95. Historia, the first harvest was in 97, and started as a project of vinification of grapes coming from very old vines. So the idea was to experiment the potential of quality of vines that are older. That means different density of plantation, but also different yield per plant, and so a completely different perspective. The wine came out in 97, was extremely successful at the beginning, and in the first years it was an experiment. It was classified as an Irpinia AGT. Then in 2003 became a DOCG Taurasi, because in the first years it was vinified in blending with a little percentage of Piedirosso in the blend. But in 2003, Piedirosso came out of the blend because the contribution was not relevant. And so I decided to reclassify it since 2003 in the DOCG Taurasi. And the wine is extremely interesting because coming from a different site, it's a single vineyard located in the estate of Mirabella, different from the character of the Radici Taurasi Riserva, that is from Montemarano, that is the coldest part of the appellation area. Mirabella is a little lower in altitude. Maturation comes a little earlier, 1 week earlier, but the average temperature is a little higher. So at the end, you got a little more delicacy. Talking about the Taurasi, of course, but a little more roundness compared to the Radici. And the flavors, you have this coffee, dark chocolate, a lot of beautiful spices. The wine has fruit and spices with a beautiful integration. So elegance and finesse. It's produced in very few bottles, about 3,000 per year. So it's a small production, but it's a very interesting example of the fact that Taurasi is not just one wine. Taurasi as an appellation area, can express so many different things, and we are obliged to allow people to experience all of them. So we want to give this wide representation of the potential of a beautiful appellation like Taurasi di OCG.
Okay. It is a beautiful wine, and of course it's paying homage to Pliny the Elder for his great work, Naturalis Historia. Now, the final thing I'd like us to touch on, Piero, is wine hospitality. I drove over from the coast today, over the mountains, into another world. Irpinia is very different from coastal Campania. It's very, very beautiful. It's a long time since I was been here. It's more than 30 years. I was here in 1989, I believe, which was actually when the area was still recovering from a terrible earthquake of 1980. And I know so much has changed, and I know that wine hospitality, in 1989, people weren't really traveling to find wines and to try to find the stories of wines. But now that's a very important activity for wine lovers. And I hope that our listeners will find their way to Atripalda. So tell us about wine hospitality here.
Yes, just 10 years after your first visit here. So in 1999, I decided to start a new project of wine tourism and hospitality. And so in one of our largest estates, the one that I mentioned in Mirabelle Clano, I established a wine resort where we have, it's called Radici Resort. And there we established two different restaurants. One is a fine dining, and the other is like more an osteria with the zuppe, with the minestre typical of the region. And we also have, of course, the hotel, the country hotel, with 12 suites dedicated to the guests. And there's a spa, of course, there's a heated swimming pool, trekking. I mean, it's a very, very nice way to present our territory. In a 65 hectares property, you really find the heart and soul of Irpinia. And this is another contribution that I want to leave to my land, to my homeland, because I think that the potential of these hills is huge, and this wine resort has been classified among the 8 most important luxury resorts that are dedicated to wine and food culture in Italy currently. So it's for me a huge satisfaction to have had the possibility to open a new chance of development for Irpinia.
Yes, and I think that's important for the area as well, because I think for people that love wine, we love being in wine country. It's nice to be where vines are, where wine is produced, and then to also have other activities that one can come and really hang out and live in an area is a great opportunity. So I hope that our listeners will find the wonderful Mastroberardino range of wines wherever you are in the world, and even more, I hope that some will make their way to Campania and to Irpinia to discover them here at the source. Piero, it's been a real great pleasure meeting you here, returning to Atripalda after such a long time, and to sharing this story of the Mastroberardino family. Grazie mille.
My great pleasure. Thank you, Marc.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on Italian Wine Podcast. Please remember to like, share and subscribe right here or wherever you get your pods. Likewise, you can visit us at ItalianWinePodcast.com. Until next time, chin chin.